Coming in at number 5, we have Demonic Boy. You might have seen the photo of the Demonic Boy, but did you know that the photo was taken by Ed and Lorraine during the investigation into the Amityville horror? The photo is famous in its own right, with it showing a demon being caught on camera, meaning many did not know that it was from this case. The photo features what appears to be a young boy with white eyes who is peeking out of a doorway. Ed and Lorraine had set up an automatic camera that took infrared pictures to capture the second floor landing during the night. In the morning, when they checked through the pictures, they were shocked to see the little boy in the image. This remained a secret until 3 years later when it was shown to the public. But who could the boy be in this image? It is believed to be John DeFeo, the young boy who died in the home along with the rest of his family. Usually this would just be a guess, as you don't usually get a clear photo of a spirit, but if you compare the photo of the ghost boy to a photo of John DeFeo when he was alive, you can see that the spirit has the same features as the young boy. It appears to be bloody and possibly broken, but you can still tell that it is the same. The boy's hair also matches how it was when he was alive. It seems to prove that members of the family chose to stay within the home after they passed away. This could explain why the house is so haunted. Maybe they were trying to warn the Lutz's family not to stay there, or they might meet the same fate. Coming in at number 4, we have the DeFeo's furniture. When the Lutz family bought the house, it still had all of the furniture from the DeFeo's family inside. It all remained untouched since that horrible night. The Lutzes decided to keep all of the furniture so they could move in with it already to live in. The family even slept in the same beds that the DeFeo's passed away in. Ed and Lorraine believed that the presence of the same furniture could be what caused the hauntings. The spirits were upset that there was a new family using their home. The spirits may have been attached to their beds where they had their last moments. This could even explain further into the Demonic Boy photograph. John DeFeo looked to be in pajamas peeking out from around his door. His spirit may have been resting in this bedroom when the camera awoke him and he went to investigate the noise when he was caught on camera. When hauntings occur, spirits often have attached themselves to an object, sometimes paintings, mirrors, or a creepy doll, so it seems likely that if you keep around the furniture of the family, then at least one member of the family will be attached to the house. This might have caused the Lutz's family to experience nightmares from sleeping in those beds and absorbing the spirit's fearful energy, as well as explaining the other horrors they experienced while living in the home. I don't think I could sleep there or keep any of the furniture if I knew what had happened. Coming in at number 3, they didn't plan to leave. Everyone knows that the Lutz family lived in the house for less than a month, but did you know that on the morning they left for the last time, they had always planned to return? They did not know that they were saying goodbye to their home and belongings forever. George Lutz said in one of his final interviews, I quote, "We didn't get up to leave that morning. You need to understand that. This was our house. We lived there." After a night that particularly frightened 2 of the children, the Lutz had said they had called a priest they had been in contact with throughout the ordeal, who encouraged them to go somewhere else the following night. They had, at that point, not slept through the night for weeks and thought it would be best to stay with family so everyone could rest. Instead, they ended up packing their bags from Kathy's mother's house, leaving the rest of their belongings in the house and boarding a plane for San Diego. Their belongings ended up later being sold at auction. They did not want to leave their home, but they were told that they had to. Once Ed and Lorraine were told about the events and were brought in to uncover the truth, they warned them that they could never return to the home for the sake of their family's safety. Apparently, if they had stayed much longer, their fate could have been the same as the DeFeos. The same spirits still plagued the house, and they might not have been able to fight them much longer, with them struggling to sleep, eat, and function to the best of their ability. Coming in at number 2, the DeFeos were all found in the same position. Although there are some who don't believe Ronald DeFeo Jr. was possessed, there are a number of things about that night that don't make any logical sense without the possible hauntings being involved. The first thing that seems like a satanic ritual is that every family member was found in the exact same position. The whole thing only lasted for around 15 minutes. So would Ronald DeFeo Jr. have had time to stage the bodies in the same position on each of their beds? Maybe, or maybe not. This was something that the spirits within the house did once the act had been done. The police also determined that the rifle hadn't been fitted with a silencer, meaning that after one shot had gone off, the other members of the family should have been alerted to the attack. However, there was no sign of a struggle, nor was there any evidence that sedatives had been used to knock the victims out or keep them quiet. All of which is incredibly weird. So why did no one hear the shots? It seems there is no explanation for this. The only reason anyone was alerted to what happened was the family dog. He alerted the neighbors who called the police. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, the details of this case are undoubtedly strange. Ed and Lorraine believed there was a great evil within the home. They said they had never been so scared by a case. They commented on how powerful the spirits within the house were. They even followed them home after their investigation. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have second killer. There might have been a second killer who was never caught, but there might not have been. At this time, police and investigators considered the fact that more than one person may have been responsible for the attacks. It was the only way they could make sense of some of the more puzzling aspects of the crime scene. The existence of a second culprit has never been proven, although a documentary filmmaker claimed in 2012 that he had found new evidence supporting the theory. Katzenbach is working on his third documentary about the murders. He insists that he has the documents and the evidence to prove that there was more than one person responsible for the murders. How could a person walk through a 3-story Dutch colonial and shoot 6 different victims on 2 separate levels and no one get out of bed? No one put up a struggle, said Katzenbach. Other details about the case taken together add up to a second gun and a second shooter. Evidence like a photograph of a pillowcase found in a trash can next to the canal, along with a gun found at the bottom of the canal. The police were not convinced that there was enough evidence since Ronald DeFeo Jr. confessed to the case. It was a simple open and shut case and he was convicted. However, he did say the voices told him to do it. Could it be possible that he did have help, that the evidence isn't there for the police as the help was from an entity rather than a person? The entity would not have left fingerprints or evidence of any kind, but the simple fact that things have never added up make it extremely likely. Ed and Lorraine's findings within the house would also support this. They noted that there were a number of violent, powerful entities within the home, powerful enough to attach themselves to Ronald DeFeo Jr. and help him with his crimes.
Number 5 on this list is the recording of an exorcism that Ed and Lorraine Warren facilitated on a man that was possessed by several demons. Before I break it down, let's roll a little bit of a clip so you guys can get a sense as to how far gone this man actually was.
What other entity is inside you? God is commanding you. In the name of Jesus Christ, and all the saints, and all the martyrs, and all the angels command you to answer that question. What is it? Abaddon. Okay, who else? Who else is within you? Answer the question.
So as you can see, Ed is standing with a cross to our man who is possessed and basically holding these spirits at bay, trying to figure out exactly who and what is inside of him. He mentions 2 names in that clip, Abatar and Maveth, 2 very inhuman and demonic names. He also isn't acting even remotely okay in this video. Clearly there's an inner battle going on between this man and the demons that are inside of him. Later in this clip, when the man was asked why these demons were inside of him, this is what he responded with.
Why are you in Roberto? Why are you there with Roberto? Jesus Christ doesn't like demonic spirits within a human spirit. Jesus Christ hates demonic spirits to be within a human being. You know that? You hate Jesus, huh?
The man clearly says that the demons are in him for power and that he hates Jesus Christ. Incredibly chilling stuff, if you ask me. Number 4 on this list is a clip from another exorcism that Ed and Lorraine were present at. In this video, we're going to see a priest performing the exorcism, and the biggest takeaway that I got from watching this recording was simply how far gone this person who was being possessed actually was. Let's roll the clip.
This is the exorcism part right here. You'll see the spittle come out of his mouth.
As we can see in that clip, my guy is drooling and he looks to be in really rough shape. Later in that clip, he looks up and you see his eyes, and there just doesn't look to be any semblance of a human being left inside of him. He looks completely gone, as if there's no soul present in his body. Apparently, he was the target of regular demonic possessions and had to employ Ed and Lorraine's help to try and get the demon out of him. I can't even imagine being so possessed to the point where I'm drooling and seemingly not in control of my thoughts. Really scary stuff. Number 3 on this list is a clip of Ed Warren talking to a poltergeist in a family home. Apparently this family has been haunted by this ghost for quite some time and have now had to enlist the help of the Warrens to free them from its clutches. In the first clip, Ed is going to be asking the ghost to knock on the walls of the home to answer his questions.
Are you a boy?
The mother leans against the kitchen table, her hands in full view as Ed continues asking questions.
You want the people in this house to move? 1 knock for yes, 2 for no. Yes. Okay. Who is it?
As you can see, the mother's hands are in full view of the camera and no one is making the knocking sound. This ghost has also revealed itself to be a young boy who wants this family to get out of his presumed home. I also think that the mother's reaction is extremely chilling and genuine when she says that they tried and they couldn't sell. The clip gets even more chilling as it goes though.
And you to reveal your identity.
Next, Ed decides to confront the poltergeist alone.
Give me some sign. Is that you moving something? Give me some sign that you're here.
As we can see in that clip, the chair clearly gets moved by an unseen force. They eventually brought in 3 exorcists to assist in getting this demon out of the house, and it seemed to work when they did it. However, Ed and Lorraine both admit that sometimes an exorcism can only work to quiet down a ghost, and that it can sometimes come back several months or even years later. Number 2 on this list is some raw footage from an exorcism that Ed and Lorraine performed on a Buddhist monk. This was posted on their official YouTube channel roughly a year ago, and it's pretty jarring. Let's roll the first clip.
I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you, Teresa. I'm here to help you. Me, Teresa. Think of your mother, Teresa. Do you see your mother? You see your mother. Your mother. She's talking English, Ed.
So as we can see, the person in question is in very serious trauma and their body is squirming in unnatural directions. They seem to calm down at the mention of their mother though, so potentially that's a way to reach the human soul of this individual. As the clip continues, Lorraine attempts to further calm the person with the mention of their mother, but eventually this stops working and the demon takes hold once again. The person is in full distress now, rolling all over the ground, and it seems as if their entire body is in agony. They also don't seem to be making any sense with what they're saying, just strange, unsettling noises. The clip doesn't inform us at the end if the couple were successful in their endeavor to get this person free of this demon, so sadly, we're just left with the horrible image of them demonically twitching on the ground. Number 1 on this list is from the Enfield Poltergeist. Now this story is one of the most famous Ed and Lorraine Warren tales and inspired The Conjuring based on how terrifying it was. If you aren't familiar with this case, then it was centered around a home that had paranormal activity happening from 1977 to 1979. Furniture moving, levitation, and demonic possession, those all took place. Potentially the scariest thing to come out of it though was a recording captured of the demon speaking.
Days before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
That clip is the demon speaking about how it died in this home. What's absolutely insane though is that was a young girl who was making those sounds. Now how on earth could a child make those sounds and speak that way? The only explanation is that she must have been possessed by a demonic presence. This case got national attention after that recording was released, and after hearing it for myself, it makes sense why. Number 5 on this list is the Dark Magic Doll. Yep, anything called the Dark Magic Doll is probably something I don't want to know about. That's most likely why Ed and Lorraine locked this thing up in their museum, because it's really not something that should be out in the public world for anyone to have. We've all heard about voodoo dolls before and the potential powers that they can have. Dolls that are made through some sort of dark ritual with the power to then affect people on a real life basis. Usually these dolls are made with a singular person in mind, and the doll that's created can only ever affect that one person. The same principle applies to this magic doll. However, the thing with this one is that from my understanding, you don't need to make it with only one person in mind. Simply using the doll while picturing an individual should create the same effect as a voodoo doll. It's said to use this thing, you need to hang it from its neck, and then the person that you have in mind is gonna get sick and eventually die. Now, I'm not sure if you can use this doll more than once, or if it's just a one-off, but it's probably a good thing that the public doesn't know such information. Think about how dangerous this doll actually is, especially if it got into the hands of the wrong person. Somebody who wanted to inflict harm onto someone else could easily do so from the comfort of their own home, and nobody would be the wiser. To make this doll requires some pretty dark rituals and some sinister magic, but the Warrens were pretty secretive about the exact process of constructing this thing, and again, probably for the best. Having information like that out in the open on how to make such a deadly and dangerous doll just isn't safe for anybody. Right now, the only known doll is currently locked up in the Ed and Lorraine Warren Museum. Hopefully it stays there and we don't ever see any more of these creepy things popping up in the world again. Number 4 on this list is the Smurl Haunting. So we've all heard about Amityville and we've heard about the Enfield Poltergeist, but one haunting that didn't get talked about nearly as much was the Smurl Haunting. Maybe it's because it was just a little bit too scary and the Warrens didn't want to release such information to the public. An article discussing the 7 best cases from Ed and Lorraine writes, in 1974, Jack and Jeanette Smurl moved into a house on Chase Street, West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Strange occurrences followed, leading the Smurls to believe that a demon possessed their home. They claimed the demon had slammed their German Shepherd into a wall, bit Jack's ear, and pushed one of their daughters down a flight of stairs. Both Jack and Janet were said to have been assaulted by the demon. In 1986, they contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, who confirmed that their house was indeed haunted. Ed Warren would go on to say that he had witnessed a dark mass form inside the home and that the demon had left him a message telling him to get out. Now, one thing that I think gets glossed over a little bit in this article is the time that these people moved into their home compared to the time that Ed and Lorraine actually showed up. 1974 is when they entered this house, and Ed and Lorraine didn't get there until 1986. These people were living in a home that was severely haunted, so much so that they were getting assaulted by a demon, and they were living there for over 10 years. I think we think about haunting sometimes as being like a week-long scary event or something like that, but this was literally over a decade of living in absolute fear. Why this family didn't move is beyond me, but maybe they were scared this creature would just keep following them wherever they go. I think this is why this one doesn't get talked about as much. 6 months is one thing, but 10 years is totally different. Ed and Lorraine knew that and probably didn't want to scare the public into thinking that they could get haunted for potentially their entire lives. Number 3 on this list is the African fertility dolls. Tony Spera goes into detail about these dolls on the official Ed and Lorraine YouTube channel, and the story is pretty creepy. Apparently these dolls, which are now in their possession, were originally from Africa. They were made by an African witch doctor, but were then stolen from him and brought back to America. They were sent to a police officer who was in on the theft and thought that he could get some serious value for some authentic African fertility dolls. What he didn't expect was for these dolls to take his life. After he acquired these dolls, he soon became paralyzed from the neck down and, after some time, succumbed to this disease and died. These dolls are cursed, and after stealing them from their respective owner, took the life of those who were responsible. Now they're in the museum, and Tony warns us on the YouTube channel about ever touching them, for a similar fate could happen to us. It's stuff like this that really flew under the radar during Ed and Lorraine Warren's time. But the fact that these dolls exist, and there are probably many more of them in the world, is truly very terrifying. Number 2 on this list is the South End Werewolf. Born and bred in the Essex seaside town of Southend, the first inkling of trouble came when William Ramsey was just 9 years old. Like any normal child, he was outside in his back garden when he began to feel strange. It was deep into one Saturday afternoon in 1952 when an icy blast of frigid cold swept over him. Perspiration froze on his skin and a foul stench came close to making him vomit. The bewildered youngster only had two things on his mind: running away to a life on the ocean wave and wolves. By this time he was close to the garden fence and only the calls of his mother brought him out of whatever had gripped him. However, something else took complete control of him instead. Intense and pure rage had installed itself firmly within his psyche. Using this and the adrenaline-fueled strength he now possessed, he had uprooted a fence post with the fence still attached to it and was swinging it like a club. Not even his parents could easily remove the post with their bare hands. That was a passage written by Les Hewitt talking about the beginning of the Southend werewolf case. This incident was the beginning of a long road for Bill. For 15 years though, he didn't have another episode until he started having dreams. Dreams that his wife would look at him and run off in fear after seeing him. These eventually ceased, but then 15 more years later at a party, it all came out. Apparently on the drive back home from this party, Bill lost it. He turned into a complete animal and the wolf came out. Scratching and biting at the driver, Bill had completely turned into a werewolf. His body changed too. His shoulders hunched, his nails grew to claws, his humanity had completely left him. The Warrens were then brought in to help him and had to perform several exorcisms to get rid of this werewolf presence. Think about this entire story though. Bill, to my knowledge, hadn't been bitten by a werewolf or had any extended exposure to one. He just became one. How scary is that? At any given point, I could just slowly start to develop werewolf-like characteristics and turn into a rabid super beast. I think that's why this case didn't get as much media coverage as some of the other ones. Just the fact that something like this could happen, and I mean, that could really scare the public. And finally, number one on this list is the Shadow Doll. So we already talked about some other dolls, but this takes it to a whole nother level. You know the horror movie franchise Chucky? Where the doll is possessed with a serial killer and it's out to get people, like that whole bit? Well, this doll makes Chucky look like the sort of thing you invite to your kid's birthday party. Yeah, it's pretty freaking bad. The Shadow Doll, for one, looks absolutely terrifying. It looks like this woman with a white face totally covered in black robes with chains and spikes sticking out of her. It's apparently made of bones and even has a human tooth in it. Now, even though this doll doesn't operate like Chucky and move around in the real world, it does something even more terrifying. Anytime you go to sleep, you aren't safe if the Shadow Doll has you in its sights. It's said that this grotesque looking creature will come to you while you're sleeping in your dreams and terrorize you. It isn't said to be a quick kill either, like this thing's pretty sadistic in how it haunts you. It will keep coming back over and over and over again until finally it terrorizes you to a point where your heart literally stops out of fear and you never wake up. Think about how horrible that would be. To be absolutely terrified of going to sleep because you know that the second you close your eyes, this shadow doll could be upon you and it might be your last night ever. Similar to the other dolls that we talked about, this thing is locked up in the museum, but I personally don't think that's enough. I know that the Warrens like to show this stuff off, but honestly, screw it. This thing is far too dangerous, burn it with some fire, and let's be done with it. Number 5 on this list is the relationship. As we'll look at a bit later in this video, Ed and Lorraine's relationship might not have been all it was cracked up to be. The couple that inspired The Conjuring have often been talked about as being one of the greatest married couples ever. In the movie The Conjuring, the pair very clearly have each other's back, and it's clear that there's a deep foundation of love between them. Or at least, that's how the movie likes to show it. Real life may have been a lot different. Judith Penny was someone who would have had access to the Warrens' relationship and would have been able to see it behind closed doors. We'll get into why that is the case later and explain who Judith Penny is, but for now, just take my word for it. Apparently, she has come out and said that the Warrens' beautifully loving relationship that we saw on screen is all a bunch of baloney. In truth, Ed was extremely violent and toxic to Lorraine. This toxicity would manifest itself in many different forms. Oftentimes it would come out in harsh, verbal that felt as if it was coming right from thin air, totally unprovoked by Lorraine. However, occasionally this would manifest into physical abuse. Judith has come out and said that one particularly bad evening she saw Ed backhand Lorraine across the face with all his might, and apparently she lost consciousness. Now Lorraine wouldn't just sit there and take the abuse either, she would fire her own shots as well. Judith thought that some evenings one of them wouldn't even be waking up the next morning based on how much they were fighting and how intense it would get. This has all the telltale signs of a horribly toxic relationship. The pair were just very good at hiding it. Number 4 on this list is the Amityville horror story. I feel like you've heard this story before, guys. Arguably the most famous of all the Ed and Lorraine Warren cases, this singular case launched the pair onto the main stage as being some of the biggest demonologists and paranormal investigators on the planet. Therefore, it was incredibly important to their image and their brand that this story was believed by the public. Fact of the matter is, though, they made the entire thing up. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was the spark behind this entire story. In 1974, Ronald gunned down his entire family in that home for seemingly no reason. He was later sentenced to life in prison for his crimes and died behind bars at age 69. These murders were brutal though and were heard nationwide. That's why when the next family to move in claimed the house was haunted, it actually got a ton of attention. The family said that slime would appear all over the place with no apparent origin. Things would swing open and objects would fly around the room. The house itself could simply not warm up and would stay incredibly cold for weeks on end. The media got wind of this and so did Ed and Lorraine. They went into this place and went on to have their most successful case ever, ultimately concluding that the house is in fact haunted. However, this just simply was never true. The family's lawyer later came out and said that they collectively made up this story together and thought it would get a lot of traction over a few bottles of wine. The Warrens' initial success literally started by a few drunk people deciding they were going to pull a trick on everyone. Even though this news came out, the Warrens have always held strong onto the fact that the house was in fact haunted. Number 3 on this list is Judith Penny. Ed and Lorraine Warren were married right up until Ed died back in 2006. The couple had been together for a long time and shared quite the life together. I mean, think about all the crazy things that they did. I highly doubt that many people can say that they stopped ghosts around the world and became famous together. While they were at the height of their success, they looked like a power couple. A real duo that you wouldn't want to trifle with. Ed and Lorraine Warren together taking on the world one ghost or possession at a time. Well, during all of that, although it looked like it was just the two of them, there was actually a third. Judith Penny has come forward and said in a sworn statement that she had a relationship with Ed Warren for 4 whole decades. 4 decades where they were having an intimate relationship that the world had no idea about. Apparently, Judith moved into the Warren household when she was 15 years old back in 1963. Ed, who was in his mid-30s at the time, would sleep with her regularly, and Lorraine Warren was well aware of the entire thing. I mean, she obviously was, considering Judith literally lived with the pair in their own house. In fact, before Ed's big career of being a demonologist took off, it said that he would drive Judith's bus to school. How freaking creepy and gross is that, guys? Literally her school bus driver, but also her lover while she's 15 years old. This relationship apparently went on until 2003, 3 years before Ed finally passed away. Obviously, the Warrens didn't want any of this getting out to anyone and kept it very hush-hush. She even had to have when she became pregnant with Ed's child, and that was kept under wraps. What we thought was this power duo was actually a sick and twisted trio that we knew nothing about. The Warren family, before Lorraine died, came out and said that they had no knowledge of the alleged conduct. Number 2 on this list is the Lady in White. The Lady in White was a ghost that was said to haunt the Union Cemetery in Connecticut. This was another one of the Warrens' most famous cases and gained a ton of notoriety. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, guys, but it's fake. Let's roll a clip of what is supposed to be evidence of the Lady in White. So first off, where the hell is the ghost there, and how on earth did this qualify as proof? Like, frankly, I hardly see anything at all, but even if I did, guess who's behind it? Judith. Yeah, the girl that Ed had an illegal relationship with was the lady in white, literally dressed up in a sheet, and the pair took some grainy pictures and videos together and claimed it was evidence. Just another secret that the Warrens tried to hide, but eventually it's bubbled to the surface. And finally, number 1 on this list is the smoke and the mirrors. We've already talked about the Amityville horror house and the lady in white here, and about how they're all fake. Well, guess what, folks? I hate to do this to you, but they ain't the only ones. Everything the Warrens did was just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. The Smurl Haunting saw other experts come in and look at the space. Nothing was wrong with it. Some of the exorcisms they performed, those people weren't really possessed by the devil, they were mentally ill people that the Warrens were preying on. The whole story about how they cured someone of being a werewolf, like, that doesn't even make any sense. Smoke and mirrors. That's what the Warrens' career was. Now, that's not to say that they didn't inadvertently stumble upon something paranormal every now and again. I mean, if you believe in that sort of stuff, then they must have, based on how active they were in the community. But basically, a lot of our favorite stories that rocketed them to the top of the demonology community are completely fraudulent. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world to know that we aren't living among as many ghosts as the pair claim that we were. Number 5 on this list is the haunting in Connecticut. This haunting is the haunting of the Snedeker family. Listverse writes, after renovations on the house were complete, Carmen Snedeker entered the basement for the first time. There, she found embalming equipment and body tags with the names of the deceased. The family soon realized that the house was infested with demons. Carmen witnessed the water in her mop bucket turn a different color. She recalled the mop water was blood red. I mean a deep, deep red. It made my skin crawl. The middle son said the lights were coming on and off and on and off even though there was no bulbs in it. Ed and Lorraine Warren assisted in performing an exorcism on the house, which has brought closure to the family. Since then, no further paranormal activity has occurred. The Snedeker family remained in the house for 2 more years before they relocated to Tennessee. So guys, all of this is well and good, and it's what the Warrens want you to believe. Is it true? Probably not. You see, they had someone come in and write a book about the events that happened here. He went in and interviewed the family multiple times, and it turns out that they couldn't keep their story straight at all. They were all over the place, and it felt like nobody actually knew what happened. Then he went to Ed and told Ed that he can't write this story because nobody has any idea what actually went down. And you know what Ed said? Just make it up. That's literally what happened, guys. The story about this place is just made up, and it was probably never even true to begin with. Also, while literal mop buckets were filling up with blood downstairs, the upstairs neighbor was totally fine and just living their life. Seems kinda strange that the demonic possession would differentiate between floors, but I guess that's what the Warrens want you to think. Number 4 on this list is the Vampire Girl. Now this is one of those cases that, if it's true, doesn't get enough of the limelight. The Warrens have dealt with werewolves before, and we actually looked into the South End werewolf and what it's all about in one of our previous videos. But this vampire case, it never really gets talked about. The Warrens were brought in to deal with an 18-year-old girl who was going down a path of vampirism. This girl was very interested in death and the underworld. She started performing satanic rituals by herself and, as you'd expect, ended up becoming possessed. The possession was clearly vampiric in nature, and the demon was hungry for blood. It's said that she would wait in cemeteries for unsuspecting victims and then attack them right when they got there. It was reported that 16 people were bitten by this girl, and she would actually drink their blood. To my knowledge, nobody was killed, but there were obviously some pretty serious injuries involved. Now what strikes me as odd is why this case hasn't been discussed more. It almost feels a bit like a secret because it's never brought up and largely forgotten about. Yet, when you consider what actually happened and the events that transpired, this is one of the most shocking things they ever did. The fact that we don't bring up this case and talk about it more actually leads me to believe that if there is any truth to be had in the Warrens' exploits, it might be here. Maybe they were actually trying to protect the world from the truth here. the truth that vampires are potentially real. Number 3 on this list is Ed's relatives. This is something that really doesn't get mentioned a lot, but Ed Warren saw demons just like the rest of the people he tried to help. I think the media often portrayed the Warrens as these almost superhuman individuals who were impervious to the will of paranormal entities, but Ed certainly struggled with this growing up and for much of his life. Apparently, Ed would be frequented by the ghosts of long-past family members. These paranormal entities would speak to him and tell him to do things. He was pretty private about what they would say to him, but we know that he did in fact get frequented by them. Who knows what they could have told him to do though, or how long he was seeing these visions. I think the reason that this was kept under wraps for a while was to preserve Ed's image as the person who comes in and saves people from these paranormal entities, rather than potentially somebody who suffers from them as well. Number 2 on this list is Aaron Cheyenne Johnson. This is the infamous Devil Made Me Do It case. Aaron Cheyenne Johnson killed his landlord in 1981 by stabbing him to death. When he was brought to court though, he claimed that he was not in control of his actions and the devil literally possessed him and made him do it. Now this is pretty serious stuff, so how does Ed and Lorraine Warren fit in? Well, it's been speculated that Ed and Lorraine might have made the entire thing up, which effectively means that they were trying to get a murderer to go free based on a blatant lie. Johnson had a brother-in-law whose name was David. David was mentally ill. He needed professional help. The Warrens saw this as an opportunity and decided to try and exploit it. They came in and tried to manipulate the family to say that David was initially possessed with a demon and that Johnson came in, told the demon to take his body instead, and saved David from said demon. If the public believed this, then the Warrens would be smack dab in the center of a massive demon case. David and his family would get a lot of money from publicity deals, and the murderer Johnson would get off scot-free. It was a win-win-win for everyone except the justice system. Well, David's family wasn't happy about it after some thinking. They ended up suing the Warrens, claiming that they manipulated them and tried to get a guilty man to walk free, which if everything that I just said is true, they did actually do. Just another secret that came out that they didn't want to be revealed. And finally, number 1 on this list is Annabelle. In our last part of the series, we were breaking down some of the Warrens' cases and talking about how some of them may have been fraudulent. Well, a lot of you were commenting on that video asking about one of their most famous cases that I haven't brought up yet. Annabelle. The Annabelle doll is one of the most widely known cases that the Warrens participated in and would probably be on most people's lists when it comes to the creepiest dolls to ever exist. This doll even inspired the creation of a horror franchise of the same name that's had 3 separate installments in it. Pretty good notoriety for an inanimate object. Or maybe inanimate is the wrong word when talking about Annabelle. The legend began back in the 1970s when a young nurse named Donna received the doll as a gift from her mother. The doll took up residence on her sofa and at first was a nice and calming little plush toy that had nothing demonic about it at all. Soon things started getting a little bit weird though. Donna would go to work and find things out of place or doors open that weren't that way when she left. Then her and her roommate started finding notes around the apartment. Tiny little scribbled notes on parchment paper that would read, "Help me." Finally, it all came bubbling up when Lou, Donna's boyfriend, was in her apartment one afternoon by himself. The most common version of the story says that he was napping and then woke up to the doll literally trying to kill him, strangling him until he finally had enough strength to throw it off of him. Apparently he even had several scratch marks on him for a few days, but then they went away after that. This is when Ed and Lorraine entered into the mix. They took the story and absolutely ran with it. Apparently as they were taking this doll, which they had determined was possessed, as they were taking it back to a safe place, it tried to crash their car several times, and only putting holy water on it would stop this interference. Of course, no one else was actually in the car at the time, so we just sort of need to take their words for it. And that's actually the thing with this story. The only actual evidence or proof about this doll is that they told people it was haunted. There's no video of it moving, there's no pictures of it acting crazy. Anytime I've seen it, it just looks like a regular doll. Because of this, we can't say that it's fake, but we also can't really say that it's real either. I will say, after everything we revealed in the last video, I'm starting to have a hard time just accepting what Ed and Lorraine tell me. So honestly, Annabelle being fake could definitely have been another one of those secrets that they just didn't want us knowing about.
Number 5. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal or anything. Almost immediately after its constructions, the stories of hauntings started to come out. A local legend says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had an affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. And since then, there's been all manner of legend about her spirit roaming, seemingly in the halls of the rectory. The film The Nun could possibly be based on this. In 1900, the 4 daughters of the estate owner all said they saw a nun wandering around the estate at night. When they tried to speak to her, they got no response. The family had repeatedly claimed they'd seen this nun around their property, and at one occasion, what they thought was the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider. From there on, there was constant reportings of bizarre sounds, strange shadows. In 1927, the original family owning the estate had all passed, and a new family moved in and immediately started experiencing hauntings all the same. The new family, the Smiths, discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag shortly after unpacking. They reported poltergeist behavior like unexplained footsteps, lights flickering around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. After only 2 years, the Smith family left the rectory, unable to deal with the hauntings present. The next family, the Foysters, experienced, well, wouldn't you know it, all the same things. Objects flying around their home, and on one occasion, claimed that their daughter was attacked by something horrible. They swiftly moved out as well, and the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, knocking over a lantern. Although an insurance report claims that they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil remains in the Borley Rectory, or maybe he unleashed it onto the world. Now, my friends, if you want to hear more scary stories about haunted houses and just about everything else under the sun, we're the place to be. Subscribe and creep on creeping on. Number 4. Roland Doe. Now, the story of Roland Doe is fairly notable as far as famous exorcisms go, mainly because Roland Doe's case served as the inspiration for the legendary horror film The Exorcist. Roland Doe, a name for the anonymous boy, lived a quiet life in Maryland. He was the family's only son and didn't have much in the way of friends while growing up, save for his Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist and lover of the occult. When Roland was young, she gifted him a Ouija board and taught him how to use it. Now, in 1949, dear old Aunt Harriet would pass away, devastating Roland and the family. After her passing, the family started to experience strange, inexplicable occurrences around the home. Scratching would come from inside the walls, water would be leaking out of all the pipes, and curiously, Roland's bed would be moved around in the middle of the night. Confused, the family sought out the experts of everyone they knew, and their local minister suggested they needed the help of an exorcist. Priests came to exorcise the home and Roland, believing that the boy had been possessed by the devil. They strapped him to a mattress to begin, but had to stop when he broke the straps and slashed one of the clergymen with the strap. Red scratches appeared all over his body, reading out the word Louis. The family believed this was a sign they needed to move to St. Louis, where the family had relatives. From there, they were put into contact with a series of priests who would conduct round-the-clock exorcisms on Roland. The days would pass normally, but at night, the battle would begin when Roland would enter a trance-like state, speaking in Latin, gutturally growling, even threatening priests that Satan had taken him. For weeks, the priests toiled tirelessly to exorcise the demon, until eventually there was a miracle breakthrough. The priests called upon the power of St. Michael and told the demon he was coming to battle them. Roland woke the next morning and said he had a vision of Satan and St. Michael on a heavenly battlefield, fighting for control of his soul, and that he knew Satan was gone. From here, Roland lived a happy, healthy, normal life, and his case might have been forgotten if author William Blatty wasn't inspired by the case after reading a story about it in the paper. But without him, we never would have got The Exorcist, so it all worked out, mostly. Number 3. The Crescent Hotel. Now, the Crescent Hotel is a beautiful stop if you're ever visiting Arkansas. It's been called the Grand Old Lady of the Ozarks due to its gorgeous old Gothic design and wonderful view of the mountains. What a shame that such a beautiful spot is said to be home to tortured souls unable to move on. During construction of the Crescent Hotel, a worker named Michael plunged from the death, fatally landing in room 218. The room has since been a hotspot for paranormal activity, with bizarre noises and laughter reportedly heard by the guests. But this wouldn't be the only haunting present at the Crescent Hotel. You see, before it found life as a hotel resort and a spa, the Crescent Hotel was run by a charismatic charlatan named Norman Baker, who ran an alternative clinic out of the hotel, claiming the spring waters had restorative powers and could cure any ailments. Of course, Baker didn't even have the slightest medical experience or training and was far closer to a two-bit con man than he was a doctor. Patients would check in and never leave. Baker would promise patients a cure for everything up to cancer, when in reality he was just injecting them with corn silk and water. Baker was arrested for his crimes in 1949, but the souls of those he tormented wouldn't find peace yet. All throughout the hotel, guests report strange noises, scratchings, whisperings, with some going so far as to say they see ghastly figures, floating orbs and such. There's even a notable ghost who wanders the halls. A nurse named Theodora is the hotel's most prominent ghost, who manifests as an old woman flustered out of room 14. She hates mess and discord, and many guests report that they'll discover their belongings have been rearranged if they're staying in her room. There's even sightings of a ghost cat named Morris, who luckily is a benevolent spirit. Guests report hearing purring or feeling a mysterious warm brushing against their legs. I just hope there's meow mix in the afterlife. Number 2. The Winchester House. William Winchester was the heir to the Winchester rifle throne, and married to his wife Sarah, they lived happily. They welcomed a daughter, although tragically she fell ill immediately and passed before her first birthday. Shortly after, William would pass as well, leaving Sarah alone, depressed, and with roughly $20 million kicking around. In 1886, Sarah used the money to move from Connecticut to California and began construction on her legacy, her mansion. It was built for 20 years. She paid workers night and day round the clock, demolishing one improvement to make another. But the house wasn't built like any other house. It seemed random, like it was being built out of a dream. A staircase that goes nowhere, ending at the ceiling. Multiple boarded up rooms. She spent roughly $5 million on the construction of the odd home. But why? Did she just want something to start conversations when dinner guests were over? Well, shortly after her family tragedies, Sarah visited a psychic for advice, who told her she was being cursed by the spirits of all the lives taken by her husband's rifles. That is a lot of angry cowboys. She was told she needed to build a mansion to capture the wandering souls and seal them away from the rest of the world, and she made it her life's mission to accomplish this. She thought that the house's bizarre design would confuse spirits and keep them at bay. I honestly don't know about that. I thought ghosts could float and go through walls. I don't even know if they would care. The house still stands and is a popular tourist spot for fledgling ghost hunters, who believe that her massive ghost trap did work and she's caught spirits, with reportings of mysterious sounds. There are some who even claim that Sarah herself has been trapped in her home, doomed to walk amongst the spirits she worked so hard to capture. Number 1. The Bell Witch. In the 1800s, a farmer named John Bell moved his family to Adams, Tennessee, onto a bountiful 300-acre farm. Bell quickly became a figurehead of the community, respected by many, and becoming a local leader at his town's church. For the Bell family, things were the brightest they've ever been. They were living the dream. But things wouldn't be good for long, and they'd find themselves in a nightmare. By 1817, strange things started to occur around the farmstead. John found a mysterious animal, a mutant hybrid that resembled a grotesque mix between a dog and a rabbit. The Bell children would complain to their father that they would hear strange sounds that sounded like vermin gnawing at all things in their bedrooms, and the children would wake up with scratches all over their bodies. At all hours of the day, everyone in the family would complain that they could hear faint whispering and singing, and that it sounded like an old woman was singing hymns on their wall. Most tragically, the Bells found a mysterious vial of liquid inside their home that no one could understand. Nervous about what it was, John Bell offered a small amount of it to their cat, who passed almost immediately after. For 3 long years, the Bell family was tormented by these strange occurrences, chalking it up to a mysterious entity that would later be known as the Bell Witch, named after the mysterious old humming that they kept hearing. In 1820, John Bell grew extremely ill, quickly descending in health and passing. At his funeral, the mourners complained that all they could hear was the laughing of an old woman, mocking and singing at the late John Bell. The farm was so notable that it even caught the attention of President Andrew Jackson, who in 1819, a year before John Bell's passing, visited it to see if the legends of the witch were true. Allegedly, as soon as his carriage arrived at the property, the horses refused to budge anymore. The animals can always tell.